and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you could. This is Adam from Miller's Custom Guitars and the N+1 Podcast. I hope that you had a great holiday season. I know that I did. I had a great Christmas, and this episode will be dropping after New Year's. And I hope that you guys can extend me a little bit of grace in taking the month of December off, which I did. We're launching right into the New Year's with brand new episodes and a couple great guests lined up for you. If you're new to the show, this show is the N+1 Podcast, and this show is all about hobbies, passions, obsessions. I like to bring on guests, and we like to interview amazing guests and talk about just whatever they're into. We want to talk to guests about what makes them tick, what they're into. It's the name of the show is like for guitar players, right? I'm a musician, a guitar player. How many guitars is enough guitars? And the running joke for ages upon ages is the correct number of guitars is N+1, right? There's always room for one more guitar in the stand. If you're an artist, there's always room for another painting on the wall. If you're a mountain climber, there's always another mountain to climb or another trail to hike. And so that's the name of the show is N+1 Podcast. I don't just want to know what all of our guests are passionate about. I want to know what is next. That is the show. And so we always bring on amazing guests. And if this is your first time on the show, I'm so excited to bring on today's guest, which is an old high school friend of mine. I've known this person for probably over 20 years. That's kind of scary. This is my high school friend, Kyle Waller. He's an amazing chef, and we will talk to him about what he's currently up to. And I've been wanting to talk to a chef for a long time, so we'll hear all about that in just a minute. And then we will find out about that. So without further ado, we will get into the episode and we will talk to Kyle. So Kyle, welcome so much. This is Kyle Waller, who I have known for at least probably 20 years, dude. Can you believe it's been that much? Desiree and I have been married 18 years. I remember, I know it's been that long. It's probably been more like 25 years because I'm 42. And do you remember I think you played at my 18th birthday party. Remember you guys opened for Prosper? Do you remember that over at don't you remember that?
Was it Hanyak?
It wasn't Hanyak. It was the one that it was I don't know.
The one with Tim Dalrymple?
No, it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't you, but it was back it was pretty far. It was pretty back there. I don't know. Whatever. But anyway, we've known each other going back to high school. Yeah. That was a long time ago. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You threw me off mentioning Tim. I should have him on the show. He's amazing. He's an amazing musician.
Yeah, he is.
Writer. I should have him on the show. But thank you for coming on the show. And I wanted to talk to you because you have, in high school, you were a rock musician, but you spent basically your entire career in the professional kitchen as a chef and a barista and, a pastry chef. And I just wanted to talk to you about that. I consider myself a pretty talented cook. I can cook some pretty delicious things. We made tamales for Christmas. They turned out delicious. You guys will have to excuse me. I'm fighting a little head cold right now. I made tamales for Christmas and they turned out really delicious. But like I'm not a chef. I'm not a cook. I'm more of a cook than a chef. But Kyle here is professionally trained. He's the real deal. So Kyle, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your current role is and what you do there, and then after that, I'll have some follow-up questions and how you got there.
Sure. So right now I work for a hospitality company called Plants and Animals, and we're here in Burien, Washington, which is just about 15 minutes southwest of Seattle proper. And we're basically the first, just one of the first cities that are not incorporated into the city of Seattle. So pretty close to downtown, still feels kind of like a, hometown or like a rural, but a lot of the, big metro amenities. And we have 3 shops right now, 2 coffee shops. One's in White Center. It's called Moonshot Coffee, and that's a little pocket hole coffee shop. We also have a coffee shop in Burien called Burien Press, and that was our first store or first shop. And then we have another all-day cafe in another part of Seattle called it's called Beacon Hill, just another kind of neighborhood spot. So those 3 spots are under our umbrella. We also have like a wine distribution that we developed during COVID, which is like basically a wine delivery system or delivery service. And yeah, within our hospitality company, we have a kitchen program, which we have a ghost kitchen or a commissary kitchen or whatever you want to call it. It's a kitchen that's not attached to any like retail or like front customer facing. So it's a kitchen that we make all of our food in, and then we pack it up and we deliver it. So almost like a catering company, but we cater to ourselves or to our own coffee shops. And right now, my title is the food service coordinator at this hospitality company, and what that basically is like the woke term for executive chef. And I mean, we can get into this another time, but I feel like the hospitality industry is sort of like reimagining what the roles are like, and verbiage and like titles. And this is happening, in lots of different professions where we're not calling people managers anymore. We're pivoting our language. So
like for example, who was the last time anyone said secretary, right? Like we don't say secretaries. We don't say, like exactly just like what you said. So
yeah. So I think it's like, sort of like a modern term, but in all intents and purposes, I would be considered like the executive chef or the food director for our company. And what that means is basically I am in charge of like facilitating all the food that either gets made or curated by our team. And that started with, when I started out, I think it was in 2019 with this company. We had 1 food service employee, which was myself. And I was just working at a small little like 6-foot table in one of our coffee shops with a big dream to like, grow this program. They were buying all their food from other vendors. So basically I just started like loading up their deli case with, thoughtful, wholesome food that wasn't, didn't have a lot of processing. And we just really grew that from, quiche and frittata and breakfast sandwiches to, I think we have like over 40 or 50, menu items amongst all of our cafes that we're responsible for right now. So, I mean, from ordering or from conceptualizing all the dishes to testing, recipe testing, costing, doing all the back end work on all of our recipes, to teaching how to, produce the product, how to pack it, how to deliver it, how to heat it up. I'm responsible for from start to finish, coordinating all of that, all of our food that we make. And so one of the big things that we do also is a lot of pastry. We've developed, I think like 8 or 9 signature cookies. We either bake those off ourselves, or we.
I think I kicked the cord on my phone or my camera.
Oh, bummer.
And gosh, this is just. Oh, I think my camera might have gotten too hot and switched over. Wow, this is just wonderful today.
That's okay. We're making it work.
Go to the webcam. Oh, guys, everyone's gonna see the lie.
Would you see the lie in my garage?
Yeah. Look, we still have stockings up, guys.
Nice. So we've been developing a lot of pastry products, a lot of which we're like making in the kitchen, freezing those products, and then delivering them frozen, like croissants being like example. We make the croissants in our ghost kitchen. We freeze them and then deliver them frozen, and then the cafe will proof those or like let them rise and bake them off. So we do a lot of like the beginning work, and then we let the cafes do a lot of the finish work on some of our products. So it's a role that I haven't really ever been in before. I've mostly been in fine dining for my entire career. Doing, tasting menus and, real, time consuming type of cooking. And so this was really a role to be able to be a full-time dad and do something that's like part-time. And, the food and hospitality industry is very demanding. So all my years in fine dining was, a lot of sacrifice of my time to those establishments, those restaurants. And so I'm just at a point in my life where it's like, I could either go into like working for like a, food, like selling food, like being like a salesman, like for like a, purveyor or something along those lines, or doing something a little bit more like stepping out of the, like, not spotlight, but like out of the fast lane so much, and like working somewhere that's a little more like
change a pace.
Yeah, a different pace.
Right. You wanted to change a pace. Now, this is one question I ask like all of my guests, which is to like explain it like I'm 5, right? How old are your kids? You got kids, right?
Yeah, I have 3. I have a 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a almost 2-year-old.
So, like your 5-year-old, how would you explain kind of what you do to your 5-year-old? Like something simple, just to explain, like what you do to your 5-year-old.
Like what do I do? What do I do in what?
Like your job, your job and your overview of your job, just like something a simple.
My 5-year-old
summary.
So my job is I make tasty food for people.
Yeah, very simple.
But I also have to do everything that comes with that.
Yeah,
and that's from doing dishes and scrubbing floor drains, and to like managing inventory, and that's really what my job right now looks like. A lot of number crunching and like making systems to the food. And I think it's like like a lot of people can be really good cooks. Like I'm sure you make delicious food. I think what separates like a professional chef from like a home cook is being able to mass produce or understand like making systems that work for making things a lot larger scale.
Right.
Also, being able to do that consistently.
Right.
Like what were you saying you made for Christmas this year?
Tamales.
Okay. Right. So, you have to be able to make the same exact tamale every single day, no matter how your day is going, no matter if your, pork delivery didn't get there in time and your meat is not quite as tender as it's supposed to be.
Right.
You have to push things, in certain ways. And so, developing systems to make products really consistent is like one of the biggest parts of my job.
Right. And, 2 to 4 dozen tamales is a lot different than 200 to 400 tamales, and 2 to 4 dozen tamales once a year is a lot different than 200 to 400 tamales every day, So it's something that it's a skill you can learn, and some people can learn it and some people are great at it. So, the question that comes to my mind is like back when we were buddies, you were like this like punk kid that just liked to rock, right?
Yeah.
How did you get into the kitchen? What was your gateway drug? What was it that made you want to go into the kitchen, and how did you end up in there? And what was your path?
For sure. Well, I still do like to rock.
I'm not saying you don't.
I'm like looking at my drum set sitting up in the corner right now. Like I haven't played that in a few months. Yeah, I still do like to play music. What was my gateway drug for food? It was really at Bayer High School, honestly.
By your?
What's that?
I said by your?
By your?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that story is really odd because I went to Bayer just for my senior year of high school.
Really?
And I switched schools because a lot of my homies, like, you know, Mark Chin and Kevin and Carson, all those dudes from Hanyak, they all graduated, and I was really tight with Tim Dalrymple, and I went to Bayer to play bass in the jazz band. And the only way I could go to switch schools was to get into this food service program that Bayer offered. And it was like, they were the only food service program that was doing that with students, like in the whole school district. So I was like, okay, if I get into this food service program, I can join the jazz band with my homies. And I ended up like the tables like turned. I ended up like falling in love with the food service program and like completely hated the jazz band. I stuck it out, but it was pretty rough. It was a 0 period.
You had to get there super early.
Super early, yeah. And so the food service program, I sort of just like I was like blown away by like, you know, just sort of the pace of like what the kitchen was, and you know, it was kind of dangerous, and people were sort of like curt, but not like offensive. It was just like, this is what we're doing, you know, like down to business.
Yeah, direct.
Like, hard work, on your feet work, you know, really tangible outcome. And yeah, it felt good. If like, I remember like signing up that senior year to go in like extracurricular and make like, I don't even know how many pies we made, but it was like you know, a huge pie bake off that they did every year. And it was just like hundreds of pies. And I remember like learning how to line a pie tin for the first time, and sort of just like being like mesmerized with like the repetition and the assembly line, and like the way that they functioned. And so I really got hooked into cooking, and you know, into discovering things. And something else that really like fueled this like passion was, I grew up like eating some really boring cuisine. And my parents, especially my dad, was like very, very like uninterested in anything like ethnic or like anything weird. And so he really stuck to like a really narrow-minded sort of food-wise, you know, even vegetables. He was just like a steamed cauliflower, steamed broccoli, and that's pretty much it.
Sure.
So, you know, like I started discovering like taco trucks and like pho and, you know, like banh mi sandwiches and Middle Eastern food. Sure. And I just became like really addicted to flavor, and just like what I just hadn't experienced any of these foods before. And so it really became this sort of obsession of like, I just really got seduced by, you know, food culture and kitchen culture. And it was right around the time when the Food Network was starting to kind of gain some steam, and like there was these like chefs that were on TV, like, you know, Bobby Flay, and those you know, all those people were just starting to like kind of become popular. And I remember reading this book. Well, actually, I read this book a little bit later into my cooking career, but that was one of the things that really like solidified, like, I'm doing this as a career. Like, this is like, I connect with this so much. And it was Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential is the name of the book. And it's like, it just kind of talks about like the underbelly of like the food industry in New York City. And, it's a little bit like gruff and grimy. There's just something, I don't know. It wasn't like the dysfunctionality that I was attracted to. I really, really connected with the food and the techniques and plating food, and,
Yeah.
getting like the reaction that I would get from people that would eat something that I created, and really getting to connect with someone on a much more like primitive like level of like just like nourishing you.
Yeah.
For some reason, like just really connected with me. So
Nice. And you went to culinary school, is that correct?
I did, yeah. But before I went to culinary school, my first kitchen job was at the fruit yard.
Okay.
Do you know the fruit yard?
Yeah, over in Ceres or whatever, or on Hatch Road.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
my parents live. My in-laws live in Houston, so we drive right past it every time. So
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I worked in that kitchen doing like the buffet, like Tuesday night buffet and Sunday brunch, and I just learned how to like little things. They didn't let me on the line to cook or plate anything, but I got to run food like back and forth through the buffet, and like kind of, did a little bit of chopping and stuff here and there. And that was my first like for real kitchen job. And then I got this really random opportunity to move onto this boat that was in Long Beach. And it was through this like I went on this missions trip with Calvary Chapel,
okay,
and it was this like traveling music performance.
okay,
And like we went all through like LA, and like we even performed at like Adventureland, what's California Adventure. And it was this like traveling show, and we were like at Magic Mountain, and I ran into a friend of mine, and he's like, yeah, I'm working on this boat in Long Beach. And he's like, we're looking for a cook right now. Like one of our cooks just like totally bailed on us or something. And so I was like really sort of looking for some sort of change. I didn't really have any like ties to Modesto.
yeah,
And so, I had this interview like at Magic Mountain on the phone with the captain of this boat. And it was just this really random, like, connection that sort of felt like really, like it was going to be cool. And it was really, really cool. So I worked on that boat, and that was the first like time that I was like seriously in charge of some food, or like I was working with another person, but it was the two of us. And it turns out that this boat is like it's like science camp on a boat. So we would bring on, 100 to 150 people that would stay on the boat for 3, 4, 5 days, and we would take them to Catalina Island and back. And they would do all sorts of like science camp and like learning and like, activities and stuff that kind of went along with like marine biology. And we were in charge, myself and another person, of feeding these people like 3 meals a day. So it was like a lot of planning went into it, because we had to like load up all of our stuff and then go out for like 5 days and come back. And we had to make sure we had enough food for, quite a lot of people.
yeah,
And it was a really quirky situation, because it was like, I mean, you're cooking on a boat. We weren't like in massive seas for most of the trips, but at certain points we were cooking while it was like, we were in some heavy ocean.
yeah,
And so it was a year and a half of working on this boat that kind of went all over. We went in the wintertime. It's a little too cold to do what they did in California. So they went to Hawaii, and they did the same sort of thing in Hawaii with some schools there.
that's
And we
crazy.
had like some ties over there. So I actually went to Hawaii, and I got to like, go to all the islands. We even took this research trip all the way up to Midway. or like near Midway, which was wild. And it was, have you heard of the group NOAA?
No.
They're like, it's like the National Oceanic, I forget what the acronym is. Anyways, they're like sort of like a National Geographic offshoot. But they rented our boat and we sort of just like, we just let them do their thing. But they went on like some islands that were like uninhabited, and they had to, like put their stuff in like biohazard bags that like when they would come off, they were studying birds, I think. So we did, I did a bunch of excursions with this boat, and I learned a lot about sort of, planning for like a large group, a large event, or like, multiple days at sea. So that was like huge learning curve for me. And it was like, about a year and a half into it that I was like, I just know enough to be dangerous, and I want to go to culinary school. And I just sort of had been dreaming about going to culinary school since like, my senior year in high school.
Yeah.
And so, I left the boat. I moved back up to Modesto with my folks, and I enrolled in culinary school in San Francisco at the CCA, the California Culinary Academy. And I was actually like their first class since they started the Cordon Bleu. Like Cordon Bleu is like a chain of culinary schools.
Yeah, sure.
And they endorse all these different culinary schools. So basically they came in and they like, I don't know if they bought the school, but all the uniforms changed, the knives changed, everything you got, the books, all of that. They all changed, and so we were the first class with like all the new uniforms. And so everyone knew that we were like the newbies, like we were like stuck out, like really. But it was great. So for a while, I was living in Modesto, commuting to the city to go to culinary school for about 3 or 4 months. And I was working in Livermore. And this is sort of like a whole other subject, but for a while I had been working with my dad at his office.
This episode has been brought to you by the N+1 Podcast. We are a small podcast. We don't have sponsors, except for ourselves. We're self-funded, we're self-supported. And one way that you can support this podcast is, you could click on the link down in the show notes, whether you are just listening on your phone or in the car. There are show notes if you're on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you're listening to the show, there will be show notes. Or if you're watching on YouTube, the same thing. If you look at the show notes, there will be a link in the show notes to buy N+1 podcast merch through our Redbubble store. And that is just a way that you can support the show and wear the merch of your favorite podcast. Or if it's not your favorite podcast, just a podcast that you like. That's a great way to support the show and get the word out. Another great way that you can support the show is to just by sharing an episode with someone that you think might enjoy the show. You can share this episode with Kyle, or, just find an episode that you think is really cool. I was hanging out with Keenan Brennan a couple days ago before Christmas. And he recently got married. Happy marriage, Keenan. Congratulations. Oh, that's it. Congratulations, Keenan. Him and his beautiful bride are celebrating their first Christmas together. And he was one of my first guests. He was actually my second guest ever. And that's a really fun episode where we just talk about his passion for creativity and building guitars. That was a great episode. But just find an episode that you think is cool. I talked to Kyla Myers about running a youth community theater and her passion and how she got into that. That's a really fun episode. There's so many great episodes. We've been doing this for about a year, about 16 months. There are 36 full interview episodes. I've been looking at it. So yeah, find an episode, share it with someone. That's a great way to support the show. The last thing you can do is to join the Facebook group. Yes, we have a Facebook group where you can come on, be part of the Facebook group. And it's not just me promoting the show. It's also trying to be interactive, finding, I almost always post additional content from the episodes. If there's photos, if there's comments. And then I also try to stimulate interaction. What are the guests you want to see? What are the things you're working on? That's a great way to interact with the show, and you can find a link to that in the show notes. Anyway, we will get you back to the show. Hope you're liking it. Guys, you're going to have to forgive us for some technical difficulties. It's just how it goes sometimes. This whole recording has been technical difficulties, but that happens sometimes. I'm just really grateful to get Kyle on, and this has been a good conversation. But you're talking about you were in you're in culinary school. One of the questions I had about culinary school is, what training does culinary school give you that just on-the-job training doesn't give you? You know, like if you just go and work in kitchens, you're going to learn so much. I've known great chefs and great cooks that have just worked in kitchens their whole life. What's the difference going to culinary school?
So you're going to learn a lot of classic French technique in culinary school. That's really the foundation. So the first class, you know, you're learning classic French knife work, classic French stock making, sauce making. You learn your mother sauces. You learn, you know, all the basics of French cuisine. You know, different terms for different specific like cuts and, you know, different techniques. You know, you are exposed to like that, like French traditional cooking. And I feel like a lot of backbone is like built from that. And a lot of cuisines are rooted in that. You know, if you take something like, you know, Thai food or Vietnamese food, you know, it has a lot of like French background to it.
Sure.
You know, and so, you know, you go through a lot of different classes in culinary school. From the first is like basic skills class. You're learning how to make stocks and sauces. And there's actually a great book called The Making of a Chef, written by Michael Roman. And it is basically, the whole book talks about, you know, he went through culinary school and writes about it. It's a full book all about culinary school. So
Sure.
If you're ever curious about it, it's a pretty cheap way to learn what exactly you're getting into and pick up some little tips here and there. But you start off with basic skills. You do butchery. You do garde manger, which is a French term for cold food or the cold kitchen. And so in that class, that is a very vast world. Cold food preparation and the French garde manger. It can be anything from cured meats to, you know, like setting things in aspic, which is kind of like gelatin, doing like chaud-froid platters, like really like old school, like French, like banquet style food is what that really is about. And there's a lot of like really, like there's a lot of recipes and techniques that you're really only going to see in like high-end hotel buffet style. So a lot of it is niche. You know, it's niche to French cooking, it's niche to hotel work, and a lot of, it's not like real like pedestrian
Sure.
food. So and then you move on to, you do pastry, like basic pastry class. You do like you run a student kitchen. So basically you make hot lunch for the students. So you can go and you can grab whatever they're serving in the hot lunch kitchen. And that's a whole class. And they have like a menu that they do sort of every 3 weeks. And it's funny because like we could predict, like, we're like, oh, like I can't wait till like Wiener Schnitzel day or like Schnitzel day, because that was like one of the best meals that they made in that
Sure.
class for some reason. So we would always look forward to like, you know, second week of that class after we're like seniors or whatever, because we were so tired of all the other food. And then you move into, this was at least my curriculum. You move into some ethnic cuisine, like I had a class called Cuisine of the Americas. So you sort of studied like South American, Mexican, America. We kind of went around the country and studied a couple different, like, I think, New England was one of the cuisines. Cuban was one of the cuisines. Tex-Mex, barbecue. So you kind of study, different ethnic cuisines. I also had an Asian class, and I had it was like a European cooking class, but it was like more Mediterranean focused. So like Spanish, Italian, Turkish, Moroccan. We kind of studied like that, like Mediterranean diet a little bit. And then we went into like advanced classes. So it was like advanced butchery, advanced pastry, advanced garde manger, advanced, all the classes that I had in intro classes to, I basically had like advanced classes to those. Okay. So sort of like coming back and reviewing some of it. And then your last class was like running we had a restaurant at the school, and it was a public restaurant. So basically you could just walk in off the street and like eat there. And your last class is working in that restaurant, which wasn't a realistic view of what a restaurant actually is. Sure. And so would I go to culinary school again? Probably not, honestly. I would probably just like move to Europe and work in like a Michelin star restaurant. Because at least doing that, like you're breaking even, at least they'll like give you maybe a mediocre place to stay and something to eat. Yeah. But you work for nothing, and you pick parsley and, turn vegetables and just do really menial work, scrubbing the kitchen down at the end of the night till 3 a.m, waking up and being there at 9, just like really like the worst sort of. Yeah. But, like looking back, like I'm like, I took out massive student loan to go to culinary school. It's like, it makes me like super mad that I'm still paying for my tuition. Yeah. And, cause I was just struggling for so long to even make my like minimum, like no money towards my principal loan. So I feel like the hook was like, yeah, you're going to be able to like work in like elite restaurants, and you're going to be able to make like this much money. And that was like well oversold. Yeah. So, I got out of culinary school, and I actually moved back to Modesto, and I worked at Galetto. Sure. Great restaurant. A year and a half. And it was really, I have a funny story, because your last class technically is called your externship. And it's basically like a working class. Like you go work at a restaurant that's affiliated with the school, and then you are graded on how well you did. So these restaurants were basically getting like these freebie people to come work there, and they didn't pay me anything. So I had to like go and work at a restaurant doing real work, but it was only for school credit. And so I originally had got my extern site to be, there was this old restaurant in Modesto. Was it called Hazel's? Yeah, Hazel's, the French restaurant. Is it still there? I don't know if it's still there, but that's where I went on my prom. That's where I took my prom date. Yeah, same. Yeah, it was like the fanciest restaurant in Modesto. It was like, so like me, I'm thinking like, if I'm moving back home, I'm going to go try to work at the fanciest place. And so I hit them up, and like I got, approved to do my, my externship there. One day there, and I was like, no way, I'm not working here. This is like smoke and mirrors. Like what they were serving, like if people saw like how their kitchen looked and like what was actually being done.
Yeah.
It was like really, really mediocre food on like nice tableware.
Yeah.
And it was like maybe like the service was fancy, but the food was not highbrow.
Yeah.
And so, and I knew like walking into that place, I was like, this is not the place.
This is not the thing,
So,
man.
yeah. And so I had a backup plan. I talked to John Serlo was the chef at Galeto, and I had asked him if like he would be like a backup plan. And so, and he gave me major grief about it. But he was like, yeah, you can do your externship here. And so like the vast difference between Galeto and Hazel's was like mind blowing. Like Galeto honestly is the best set up kitchen that I've ever worked at.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a immaculate, beautifully laid out kitchen.
Yeah.
And like, if I could have a dream kitchen, it would probably be that place. Like that place is, they put so much money into that place.
Yeah.
It's probably a $5 million kitchen.
Oh, wow.
Maybe not then, but like now.
No, it would be.
Now it would be maybe more.
Yeah.
I mean, they had all the bells and whistles. They had it was super, super nice. And so, yeah, I was super stoked to work there. I learned a lot from John. He was not a nice person to work for. Pretty abusive, really typical chef type of persona, or like what people imagine, like kind of cruel, or like would just pick on you. Yeah, I didn't enjoy working with him so much, but he knew a lot. And I did like try to absorb as much as I could. And that's been a lot of my mantra of working in like highly dysfunctional places that attract, people who are addicts and, just in chaos, was to just grab a hold of any food knowledge that I could and then, kind of like ignore the rest of it. Or just like function within it, stay in my lane, and just kind of hope for like bigger things. So I worked there for like a year and a half, I think. And then I got a really great opportunity to move to the Central Coast. And I don't know if I'm like rambling or if I should keep going with like.
Well, yeah. So your path is really interesting, but I kind of want to move on to some of the questions, because you mentioned like your old boss, who is kind of that, what we might consider like the stereotypical like angry like chef maybe.
Sure.
And then you also mentioned addiction, which like kitchens are like, they have a stereotype of attracting people that have problems with addiction, in the kitchen. In your 20 plus years or whatever in the kitchen, what are some maybe misconceptions that you've come across? Maybe things that people say or hear about working in a kitchen that you found to be not true.
Things that are not true about the kitchen. I think like the kitchen is really like a really like close knit like group of people. So even if people think that it's this like big pressure, a lot of times like it can be really fun, because you get to be who you want to be with these people. You can be 100% yourself, and a lot of times, it's almost like there's so much team building within that, trying to overcome adversity, or, a lot of times like the team will rally even if the leader of the team is highly dysfunctional. And so I guess I'm trying to think of things that people say about restaurant or hospitality culture that aren't actually true. I think it's not always just like haywire and like pots and pans being thrown. you know, it can get to a really, really intense level.
Yeah.
But that's only when the business is at a really, really intense level. Like if you're pushing the envelope on how much you're trying to produce, if you're, you know, if like a very, very busy night, can really bring out a lot of flaws in systems and push a lot of, you know, stretch a lot of places that, you know, like on a slow night, it can, you know, it can be like a totally different scenario. But you can really see some of the places that people can crack. And so I think that ultimately, kitchens are a place that people feel like they could be who they want to be, and they're not being judged by, you know, a lot of times they're not being seen by the public. So, you know, it's a comfortable place. And it's a lot of times it can be really, really zen, and not be constantly haywire. So I think people see it as this like high stress 100% of the time sort of job. And, you know, there's a lot of moments that are just like really peaceful where you're just like, all you're doing is just like this really, really mundane, you know, motion of like, you know, like cleaning artichokes or something, where it's just like, you got this mountain that you have to do and you have to get through all of them. And then, you know, you're going to be there for like an hour and a half, and you're just like, you know, gabbing with somebody else in the kitchen. So a lot of times it's a lot of like therapeutic, like conversations and, you know, like arguing over music,
Right.
or, you know, so there's so much good, like therapy that happens in
Right.
kitchens.
Yeah.
So, and like healing, and like, and that's not every place, you know, and that's only little moments. And, you know, a lot of times in like, you know, high, like fine dining and high pressure kitchens, there's not a lot of room for like not being serious. Like you have to be serious like quite a bit of the time. But you know, some kitchens are pretty comfortable, and like you can kind of dress how you want to dress. Like there's not really like so much strictness, and so I've seen the gambit of kitchen culture, and I think what people people think that kitchens are 100% just like high stress, and it's not always that way.
Yeah.
And they also see that everybody is this like narcissistic sort of like self-important, and that's not always the case either, you know.
Yeah.
I think so. A lot of like what like kitchen culture has been dramatized to be this thing that's like, I don't know. There's like shows like The Bear. I don't know if you watched that show.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, so it portrays, you know, kitchen culture in Chicago as, you know, sort of what I'm talking about. This like, you know, toxic, dysfunctional, like completely like absorbing, like self-absorbing, like industry. And I don't know. I'm kind of protective of like what like there's not a lot like of people who know or who have put in the time into cooking professionally to understand that like we want to protect what we have, and also like we're trying to grow into being more, you know, kinder to ourselves, and trying to give ourselves more work-life balance, and trying to like, at least I am trying to have the best of both worlds.
Right.
And with that comes letting go of a lot of like any ego to, you know, my name or my stamp on any dishes or,
right,
you know, things that we do within, you know, so like now, we make things a lot more lateral, you know, and I try to delegate a lot of things to people,
right,
and try to like, you know, ask a lot of opinions about stuff before we move forward. So trying to collaborate with people, you know?
Yep. That leads me right into my next question, which is, you mentioned that people that work in the kitchen a lot of times don't have a great work-life balance, right? Because sometimes kitchens have kind of crazy hours. Sometimes
Mhm.
they're in early, sometimes they're working late, depends on what the hours of the kitchen are. And a lot of times, there's not a lot of name recognition. Maybe the chef has their name recognized, and a lot of times no one else does. Sometimes the chef doesn't even get recognized.
Right.
So why do you do this? What fills your bucket the most? Why, like, what gives you the giddy up to keep going?
I think right now I'm more connected with the food that I'm making in more of, not, I don't want to call it lowbrow, but it's more pedestrian than the food that I was making before. I was cooking for people who were, affluent. I honestly, most of the places that I've worked at could not afford to eat at more than like once or twice a year. Um, which is like, that's kind of weird, you
Yeah,
know? Uh, and like, basically in some ways, like, I've worked in open kitchens where I've like served people that were like so much more wealthy than me, and like being able to like kind of strip down that like barrier, but it still is kind of weird. And I didn't connect with it as much as right now. Really what fills my bucket is uh, just really like giving some people like something that they can count on being delicious and like, made with love and wholesome ingredients, and just building like some trust with people that like they can get something affordable that's like good for their body, good for their mouth.
yeah,
And giving them something that they can come in, a couple times a week maybe, and be able to,
yeah,
like rely on that type of food like on a daily basis.
sure,
Uh, and that is a lot more rewarding, um, so far in my career.
yeah,
I feel like that's been the like the most rewarding. But yeah, like really, I think in fine dining you get a lot of joy out of making the plates, look the way that they look. The presentation of the food, is really, it's fun. It's like putting together, sort of not a piece of art, but in a way it's like it can be beautiful to look at,
definitely,
if it's done right. Not only that, but like if all the food that's being put on that plate are like cooked exactly the way that they're supposed to be cooked, and they look like perfect. And sometimes there's like moments where like everything that you make that night was just so perfect, and it felt like that one service was just like the most outstanding you've had, like, you know. And so trying to like repeat that process, it's like people who make baguettes, they have uh, this sort of mantra of like, you can never make a perfect baguette,
yeah,
you know. And even though they're turning out like, you know, amazing bread, every single day, they're they highly criticize themselves and their products, and are constantly looking at the flaws, and that like strive for like perfection. It just like it hits a spot for me.
for
um,
for sure,
so I there's a lot of commonality with like producing music, or writing music, where you sometimes you just feel like it's on, like, or you're like in, like, just like an awesome moment. And there's
yeah,
moments like that in kitchen work too. There can be like a lot of adrenaline, especially in like line work, where there's this like mounting pressure of like, you have all this food to prepare. It's got to be prepared so precise and timely, and it's got to be synchronized with, it's like playing in a band almost. Everyone's got to be, it's like playing like math rock, right? Like everybody's got to be like dialed and like hitting, like, like remembering every single part. And, like I listen to like, like some like math metal, and it boggles my mind, like how do they keep their songs in order?
Right. Yeah,
And,
it blows my mind.
I think that there's a level of that in line cooking where you just get into a dance with the people around you, and you just understand like what they're going to do, and they're getting ready on this and you're looking over there, and you can kind of understand the rhythm of the kitchen, and that person's going on that, and there becomes this like orchestrated sort of movement, and it's beautiful. It can go so wrong also, like one thing getting sent to the wrong table can derail that.
Yeah, mess up everything.
Yeah, I guess that used to fill my bucket a lot more. Now I don't have a lot of that. There's a little bit, but I get to be a dad and have a really flexible schedule. So yeah.
So do you have in your career, maybe you look back and you think of one thing that is like your ultimate favorite moment or a best moment, or you just look back and be like, man, that was like so cool that this one thing happened, or that maybe an event you planned, or I don't know, something really cool that happened.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I've done like so many different like cool dinner parties, and like the amount of like different menus that I've prepared with other people, and like each one is like unique and sort of special. I guess like one that stands out, I actually worked up in Oakhurst for a while at a place called Erna's Elderberry House. Really swanky, like Austrian cuisine, or German Austrian. And Erna was the owner, and she is Austrian. And I think it was a anniversary party. It was like a 30-year anniversary party. And we made this cake that was, it got entered into a contest for, there's a company that's like, they basically are like a luxury endorsement. So they endorse different properties. They're called Relais and Chateau, and they sort of, were part of that hotel and restaurant. And so it was part of their whole company-wide anniversary, and it sort of coincided with the specific our property anniversary. Either way, it was this cake contest among like, a couple hundred different properties. And so a bunch of people entered their cakes into this contest, and our cake won. And it was like featured at their event in, like, I had to recreate it, or I had to basically like hand over the recipe so that they could recreate it in Germany.
That's cool.
But it was just a really special night. Like, it was this huge cake that we got to cut. We had this master chef who was there that night, who, he like cut the cake, and it was like, I don't know why I feel like I'm drawn to that moment. But it just felt like, like I can't see it really ever getting better than this, or like,
that is really cool.
It was just like, it was a special night. So, other than that, that's probably like
that's awesome.
Like top moment.
That's awesome. So we have a segment on the show where, if there's a way to do it, we like to invite the guests to do their topic together with us, if it's possible, on the internet, to do the topic. If you have something in mind, we can do that. If not, I have a cooking question I want to throw at you.
Okay.
Okay. Um, I have never been able to cook white rice perfectly twice in a row. I've cooked white rice. We love white rice. I've made perfect white rice
Uh-huh.
many times, but never two times in a row. I do it the same way every time.
Yeah.
But
What's the method?
so we'll take white rice. We'll rinse it in a colander or whatever until the water runs clear. And then we'll do, like, if it's doing 2 cups of white rice, we'll do like maybe 3 cups of water and uh, put it in there, a little pinch of salt or whatever, and we'll bring it up to a simmer or whatever, a boil or whatever,
Mhm.
and then put the lid on, and we'll do medium heat for 10 minutes, and then all the way to low for another 10 minutes. And
Mhm.
I've done it like that every time. Sometimes it's perfect, and most of the time, then the other times it's not.
What does it look like when it fails?
It's it's like gummy or wet, or yeah, it's like, yeah, or sometimes it's crunchy.
What
Like,
type of rice is it?
we recently switched over and decided to go 100% jasmine rice because we like that the best.
Yeah. So long grain
Yeah,
white rice.
yeah.
My method is to rinse the rice. I usually measure like 2 cups of white rice, rinse the rice, drain or rinse it until it's clear. And then I put it with, like, if I'm doing 2 cups, I do like 1 3/4
Okay,
times
okay,
water. Um, and yeah, pinch of salt, bring it up to a boil, turn it to low immediately, cover
okay,
it, make sure your lid is airtight or like doesn't have any like hole,
okay.
because you want it to steam. You don't want to lose any water. If you're losing water, that could be an inconsistency. So like if
Okay.
your lid is ajar and like more steam comes out, uh, and then but my favorite way is to make pilaf with long grain rice, and that's basically just cooking it in the raw rice in a little bit of butter before you add the liquid.
Yeah.
And that's probably like the easiest way to make rice, is just like about a tablespoon of butter, a cup of rice, saute the rice kernels in the butter for about 5 minutes on low, and then add 1 3/4 cups of liquid, usually like chicken stock and some salt. And same thing, bring it up to a boil, turn it to low, and cover it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I make rice. But I mean, there's so many different, another very, very easy way to make rice is to cook it like pasta.
Okay. Just like boil it? Like literally boil it?
Literally boil it in a large amount of water.
I've never heard of this.
And then you can just strain it. Basically, you can taste it. Like, this is how I cook brown rice, because brown rice takes a lot longer to cook.
Yeah.
Usually, like, I end up adding more liquid, or it's like the liquid to the ratio is hard to understand. So I bring a large amount of water to a boil, and then I add my rice and I cook it until it's the doneness that I like.
Yeah.
And then I remove it from the water and let it just like cool.
Okay. All right, so we're up against the time here. So let's ask you the name of the show, which is N+1. What is on the horizon for you in your journey? What are you looking forward to? What is N+1 for you?
Yeah, we're opening up another cafe in like Seattle proper in the next few months. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be more like a flagship spot for us.
Oh, nice.
So
That's awesome. Okay, before we get out of here, how can people find you if they're visiting Seattle? Where can people eat your food? Where can people find you?
sure. I don't know if you can find me. I mean,
I know
I'm
you don't use
usually stuck in.
social very much.
Um,
It was kind of hard for me to track you down, but
yeah. I lay pretty low, but I mean, you can go by the cafes. Burien Press, Moonshot, or Fable are the three cafes,
nice.
and
We'll
Yeah,
put
go ahead.
link in the show notes for those things. You guys can find them there. But before you go, I'm going to ask you the two silly questions and we'll get you out of here. Which
Great.
is, the first question is, I want you to say a quick sentence or two and casually drop the name of the most famous person you've ever met. And I don't know, you might have served some famous people. I don't know.
Yes, I may or may not have bummed or had Bono bum a cigarette from me.
No way.
On the stoop of the rest. I worked in New York City at Babo, and he would hang out there.
That's amazing.
So, but yeah, I shook the Yankees owner's hand and the Mets owner's hand
Wow.
at the same time, which is kind of weird.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last silly question is, what is, in your opinion, the all-time greatest cartoon theme song?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Nice. Spider-Man. That's the first Spider-Man we've got. That's
like
a good one.
Just like the old school Spider-Man. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. And Kyle, thank you so much for coming on. We had some trouble tonight, but I loved having you on the show, and I loved your insight into the hospitality industry.
For
So
sure.
many things I never thought about. It was great stories, great hearing from you, great seeing you. Hope you have a great New Year's, and glad you had a good Christmas. And so the rest of everybody, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, everybody, don't be a jerk.